Have a Heart, Help a Child, support Variety Club of Illinois children's charities.
Do you?
2 summers ago, Oliver North stood as the lone soldier before the Iran-Contra committees. Brash, self-confident, combative.
I do. Please be seated.
Today, Oliver North stands trial a different man. Subdued, angry, defensive, and pointing his finger in some surprising directions.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
It may fall under the broad category of what a new book aptly describes as crimes of obedience. The authors borrow from C.P. Snow, who wrote that far more crimes have been committed in the name of obedience than have ever been committed in the name of rebellion. There is reference in the book to the Iran-Contra Affair, and specifically to Colonel Oliver North. And indeed, Colonel North's defense in his current trial rests heavily on the premise that what he did only because he was following the instructions of his superiors. If he committed any crimes, in other words, they were crimes of obedience. It is a defense which finesses the much more profound question of whether anyone, under a government of laws, can legitimately order a subordinate to commit a crime.
I have now been caught in a bitter dispute between the Congress and the President over the control of foreign policy.
That's the defense argument, that everything involved in this case was a matter of politics. In fact, Colonel North has said it never occurred to him that he might be prosecuted on criminal charges. This was all a political dispute. In the last analysis, of course, the jury is going to have to decide whether they buy that argument.
The defense has not refuted a single fact of the indictment against Colonel North, but they have said that he was not acting with criminal intent and with the approval of his higher-ups. The jury is made up of working-class bureaucrats from Washington, and I think probably all of them have been in a position of having to do things that their bosses told them to do, that they aren't particularly fond of or they don't necessarily agree with. So there's that maybe in Ollie's favor. But secondly, because they are working-class bureaucrats, they probably haven't been cut a whole lot of slack in breaking rules themselves. So that could work against Ollie if they look very closely at the technicalities of the laws.
I think it's not fair to refer to the jury as a bunch of dummies because none of the jury members had watched the Iran-Contra hearings. These are people, mainly middle, lower-class folks who work very hard, have families, come home, are exhausted, turn on the tube, and they want to watch Love of Life. They didn't want to watch the news. But they know this is an important civic responsibility. They come dressed to the nines, and I think they probably pay better attention than I do.
I just wanted to see it. I think it's American history in the making. I felt I wanted to be a part of it.
He's a hero, a national hero. He's so American, so patriotic.
Full courthouse every day. You have lines of people waiting to get in. You have every seat in the press section filled. But against that, this is pretty much proceeding. This has pretty much proceeded as a normal criminal trial might.
Ali! Ali! Ali!
I don't find Ollie being the hero now that he was a few years ago. There was a small demonstration the day he testified, which I find curious because most of us who cover the trial did not know he was going to testify that day. Is it just coincidence that they showed up that day, or did somebody tip them off?
And you didn't want to show Congress the documents in the system?
I didn't want to show Congress a single word on this whole thing.
The Oliver North you saw at the congressional inquiry was a combative, feisty, some would say even arrogant at times, witness who said, in essence, yes, I lied to Congress, but I lied with a higher purpose. This Oliver North is a quiet, sincere, almost repentant witness who portrays himself as the victim of higher-ups.
One thing that the jury is going to have a hard time with is that there are great contradictions between two witnesses, namely North and McFarland, who the trial has clearly established were both considered liars by many people.
You cannot believe both men. One of them is lying. One said, I did not authorize the destruction of documents. The other said, McFarland told me to destroy documents. One says, I did not tell him to lie to Congress. The other says, he told me to lie to Congress and I didn't want to.
One thing that came out of the end of the Iran-Contra hearing was, oh, aren't Schultz and Weinberger real heroes? They were sages on this matter and wisely advised against it, and isn't it a shame that they weren't taken up on it? This document says that it was Schultz's idea in 1984 that, well, how about if the United States supplies non-lethal aid to the Contras, and then we get a Latin American country to provide military aid, and then we'll increase military aid to that country. And it says in the document, and this is in quotes, so presumably it's from the original document, that this would be a wink at Congress. So Schultz was in on this from the very beginning. Weinberger, documents show, was also clearly in on it. He evidently talked with Israel in getting them to provide captured PLO weapons to the Contras, and he told Israeli officials that if they did this, we would look with great flexibility on their economic and military needs and would figure out some way to compensate them.
George Bush went down to Honduras and spoke with the president of Honduras and told him that the increased aid was coming. Now, what we don't know is, was there a quid pro quo? Was the increased aid in exchange for their support for the Contras? We do believe there is evidence that we did promise Honduras more aid if they would help the Contras. But was George Bush the broker, or was he the messenger? That's unclear. But for him to say he was out of the loop when he was down there promising aid to Honduras, to some it strains credulity.
From the viewpoint of an historian or a political analyst, the three big jolts that occurred during this trial were, one, when Brendan Sullivan read into the record the memo which showed that Reagan approved airdropping military intelligence and recoilless rifles to the Contras inside Nicaragua at a time when Congress had outlawed any such aid. The second was when he read a document showing that Reagan approved and directed, personally got himself involved in, a quid pro quo arrangement with the Honduran government. And the third jolt was when they read, it took a long time to read it, but when they read this 42-page document outlining everybody else's involvement in this. The cumulative effect of this was to show that this was a vast conspiracy by people in the U.S. government to deceive Congress, to deceive the American public, to essentially maneuver around and perhaps even to violate American law on aiding the Contras. Again, whether this helps Oliver North out in his defense on this particular case is another question, but it certainly casts a very new light on the Iran-Contra affair.
When we come back, we'll talk with two people who should know, if anyone does, what new information the trial has uncovered. Nina Totenberg of National Public Radio, one of Washington's most respected legal journalists, and Peter Kornbluh of the National Security Archive, a private group that has been compiling all available public information on the Iran-Contra affair.
This is ABC News Nightline.
National security issues. They have been paying particular attention to the Iran-Contra affair. Peter, do you think it is an oversimplification to say either Colonel North takes the hit and ends up being found guilty of certain crimes here, or if he walks, it will be because either or both President Reagan and President Bush are found to have been culpable?
Ted, that's the historical paradox here, that the very man who was to be the fall guy for the Iran-Contra operations, if they were ever revealed, the man who said he would stand on his head in a corner if his commander-in-chief, Ronald Reagan, told him to, now that his rear end is on the line, he faces going to jail, he's quite willing to no longer be the fall guy, to throw plausible denial for both President Reagan and George Bush out the window, and introduce as much evidence as possible that Reagan and Bush knew what was going on, as well as other members of the administration.
All right, what it is that Colonel North is or is not willing to do aside for a moment, the question is, how compelling is the evidence that his attorney is introducing that, in point of fact, not only did President Reagan know what was going on, not only did President Reagan authorize what was going on, but apparently Vice President Bush may have been one of the people who helped implement what was going on.
Well, that is what is so interesting about the dynamics of the trial. The fact is that the documents do show that Ronald Reagan was not the fuddy-duddy, out-of-the-loop president who didn't know what was going on around him, that he was in the loop, that he was an actor, a player, a man who got on the phone with the president of Honduras and essentially bribed the Hondurans into helping the Contras with economic military aid and indeed enhanced CIA covert operations. The same with George Bush. The documents show that he was also in the loop. He has been up until now the invisible man in this part of the scandal, but now the documents show that he actually saw, or at least the same documents that Ronald Reagan signed on the quid pro quo to Honduras were forwarded to George Bush, that he concurred in the CIA activities that were given to the Hondurans and trade for their help for the Contras. And the evidence is very compelling. The historical record is being straightened by this trial. The myths are being dispelled, and indeed one last myth that I think is important to note that has been dispelled by the evidence that's come out in the trial is the myth that this whole operation was the result of a cabal of zealots in the White House. Everybody in the administration attended this party. Oliver North was really not a cowboy, but rather part of the herd. And it's extraordinary when you read the documents to see how many members of the administration was actually involved in trying to get illicit aid to the Contras.
Nina, pick up for a moment on the point that our colleague Tim O'Brien made in the report at the beginning of this broadcast, in which he said it's not altogether clear whether George Bush, when he went down to Honduras, was simply a messenger or whether he was an active negotiator here. What do the documents show, and what is clear and what is simply implied?
Well, what's clear is that he went to the president of Honduras and said, we'd like to give you more aid. We'd like to help you in lots of ways. What's not absolutely crystal clear is that what George Bush knew was that this was a quid pro quo. That is not spelled out in the documents, that he knew that if this greater amount of aid was given, that it would be in exchange for the Hondurans being nice to the Contras.
If it wasn't in exchange, Nina, what could he have believed was the reason for going? I mean, normally you don't send the vice president to another country to say, look, we want to thrust aid on you.
I completely agree with you, Ted. You have to presume that either the then vice president knew there was a quid pro quo, or he was pretty dumb.
What is it, I mean, where does Oliver North stand in all of this? Now, as we heard at the end of that last piece, there's sort of the suggestion that, you know, Oliver North was simply a compliant and rather obedient tool, but indeed he was anything but the initiator of what was going on here.
Well, there are two questions here. One is the foreign policy question of the Boland Amendment and whether the Reagan administration was systematically violating it. Then there's the question of the criminal law. Oliver North is not charged with violating the Boland Amendment. He's charged with 12 discrete charges: lying to Congress, obstructing a congressional inquiry, obstructing a presidential inquiry that was about the diversion of funds. And there's not been one shred of suggestion that Ronald Reagan knew that the profits from the Iran arms deal were being siphoned off and put over to the Contras. There has not been any suggestion that the president or his top aides knew that. Certainly Oliver North knew that. He was in charge of it, and he is charged with lying to Congress about it. And those are the charges. He's also charged with lying to the president's investigator about it, the Attorney General.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, one of the things that's been kind of noticeable about this trial is that William Casey, who, and I don't mean to say this in a disrespectful form, but who is, of course, conveniently unavailable for any kind of testimony, is being used almost as a legal garbage disposal for anything that doesn't fit anywhere else. I'd like both of you to talk about that when we come back. We'll continue our discussion in a moment.
It has a classic design and an engine that sings.
Major appliances that aren't brand new can scare potential buyers away. If your real estate company can't protect them, You're not listed with the right real estate company because you're not listed with an ERA broker.
This rare 19th century painting is too fragile for ordinary transportation, so they called United Van Lines. And when Kevin Anderson's family needed someone to move the things they treasured most, they called United Van Lines. United, America's #1 family mover.
Lash Flash. Elizabeth Arden Research introduces two-brush mascara with a lengthening brush to thicken and separate, and a precision brush to detail and define, plus a revolutionary twist. The brushes continually blend a unique color and vitamin-rich formula. Two-brush mascara, only from Elizabeth Arden, brings lashes twice as beautiful to life. Advanced Beauty, your gift with any Elizabeth Arden purchase of $10 or more. Available at Marshall Fields.
In 1987, we ran rings around Burger King. In 88, 2-1 over McDonald's. So, who has the best tasting hamburgers in 89?
Wendy's tastes the best.
Come on, Chicagoland, let's celebrate Wendy's victory. Get a Wendy's Big Classic for just 99 cents when you purchase a large soft drink. Big Classic, 99 cents with large soft drink purchase. Now at Wendy's, the best hamburgers in the business.
Barbara Walters gives a quiz you can't afford to miss. We could be raising a generation ignorant of history, math, literature. See if you make the grade. Thursday.
Her dreams of Olympic gold ended in drug and alcohol abuse. Tomorrow, skating star Ty Babylonia.
And best-selling author John Irving on Good Morning America tomorrow.
We're back with Nina Totenberg and Peter Kornbluh. Nina, the subject of former CIA Director William Casey. It almost seems as though everything that doesn't fit anywhere else, that can't be allocated to the president or to the National Security Advisor, or for which Colonel North does not want to take credit or blame, is sort of allocated to William Casey. And perhaps the most sarcastic exchange that has taken place yet between prosecution and Colonel North when he was testifying had to do with Bill Casey. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Well, yesterday, I think it was, Colonel North was being asked by Prosecutor John Kecker about his ledger, the ledger in which he recorded all his financial transactions. And Prosecutor Kecker said, what's happened to that ledger? Is it still around? And Mr. North said, it was destroyed. Kecker said, well, you make it sound like it was an earthquake. Is that what happened to it? And North said, no, I destroyed it. Kecker then asked, well, why did you do that? And North said, because the CIA director, Mr. Casey, told me to destroy it. He wanted the operation cleaned up, and so I destroyed it page by page by page. And as Mr. Kecker has pointed out, Mr. Casey is conveniently dead, and it's very easy to blame something on somebody who's dead.
How much has been blamed on the CIA director? I mean, there has been sort of the implicit suggestion that he was kind of the godfather of all of this that went on.
An enormous amount has been blamed on the CIA director, and in fact, one of the main pieces of evidence that came out in support of North's claim that he was authorized by the president to be the contact man for the Contras was laid at the feet of William Casey, who was quoted in one particular piece of testimony as having said that President Reagan had selected Oliver North as the point man for the Contras.
Of course, that's hearsay once removed.
That's absolutely hearsay once removed by a dead man. And we're hearing that over and over and over again. The only other person whose feet this operation is laid at all the time is Mr. McFarlane, who is very much alive and who, when push comes to shove, denies that he was fully aware of everything that Oliver North was doing, and certainly he denies that he authorized many of the things that Oliver North says that he authorized.
Peter Kornbluh, it may be, because I don't know if you've been following the trial quite as closely as Nina has, maybe it's inappropriate for me to pose this question to you. If so, I toss it back to Nina. Am I mistaken, or did that strong box with the $15,000 that was nailed to the floor of the closet in the North household, is this the first time that's cropped up?
It's very much the first time that it's ever been mentioned. None of the documents that have come out of the trial, none of the documents that came out of the hearings ever suggested that Oliver North had such a stash. He now says he kept up to $15,000 in it.
Why, for goodness sake? I mean, why in this day and age would anyone want to keep $15,000 in the house? I mean, first of all, it's probably a little more vulnerable in the house than it is in the bank. And B, it's obviously not earning interest or doing anything for you. And C, it does raise the question. I mean, folks don't normally keep that kind of money around.
Well, I certainly don't, and I don't know if you do, but not only that, but the evidence that was introduced into the court yesterday, his testimony was that these were fresh $100 bills, and John Kecker was able to show, as he began his cross-examination, that North paid for a used car with $5,000 in essentially new $100 bills, and he asked where that came from, and North said it came from this box that I kept in my closet, and it's a... go ahead.
Go ahead, Nina. I was just going to make the point that in the past, all that we've heard about has been, you know, silly little things like the pantyhose that he bought with the traveler checks, and of course the security fence that was put around the house, for which there does seem to have been a legitimate cause. This $15,000, how did that come up in the first place, and why do you think it didn't come up a couple of summers ago when during the Iran-Contra hearings?
Well, it may just have required some further investigation by the FBI. It is the bombshell, I would say, the sore point for the defense. I was going to say in your list of ABCs, the D is that Oliver North never disclosed the existence of that, what he called family fund, on any of his financial disclosure forms when he was applying for mortgages, and I think there were 3 separate occasions for him to do that. And F is that if you add up all the money he spent in 1985 in big-ticket items in which he paid cash, and that's $7,000 for a horse for his daughter, $5,000 or $8,000 for a car, more thousands of dollars for a pickup truck, $1,400 for a roof, it comes to more than $15,000, and there is certainly the very strong suspicion that he was dipping into the till, and it wasn't the till and the strong box.
Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment.
Jeep Cherokee is now exclusively available with 4-wheel anti-lock brakes. This exclusive anti-lock braking system automatically reacts to any road surface condition, so in the event of a sudden stop, the response is controlled and immediate to all 4 wheels, a valuable option. But since Cherokee is a Jeep, it's not your only option.
Now with 0% financing and special option packages, you can save up to $3,040 on select Cherokees.
Compaq is the leader in performance and intelligent innovation.
Martin, we've got an hour tops. Make or break.
Hey, it's made. Compaq has gone the extra mile for today's power-hungry users.
Give me next quarter's figures.
Yes. Compaq has consistently shown engineering excellence.
10 minutes to spare. That's hardly even exciting, Martin.
Speak for yourself.
You're on your way.
Kids and science can really get together in the right kind of place. So Dow has developed and funded the TouchTech Laboratory here at Impression 5 in Lansing, Michigan.
In this particular experiment, we're going to make a solid out of 2 liquids.
It's a hands-on museum that puts the wonders of science at a child's fingertips.
Here you go, PJ.
And who knows what that could lead to.
Dow lets you do great things.
I'd like to make a simple point about a new gasoline additive called ProCare. You see, without proper care, even new car engines accumulate deposits that can lead to a rough-running engine. Fortunately, there's ProCare. Added to a single tank full of gasoline, ProCare's patented Techron chemistry begins cleaning deposits not only from fuel injectors, but throughout your engine's intake system for a noticeably smoother performance. New ProCare for a smoother running engine.
Back with Peter Kornbluh and Nina Totenberg. Peter, the President has made it very clear that while this trial is in progress, he doesn't want to comment, and indeed that is the appropriate thing for him to do. But at some point or another, he's going to have to address some of the issues that have been raised in this trial. What is going to be the appropriate forum for that?
Well, I don't know. The press obviously can confront him at every press conference that he holds from now on until they get a satisfactory answer about the many questions that have been raised by these documents and by the trial. The special prosecutor could conceivably continue his investigation into this affair, which would include looking into George Bush's role. Those are the forums that exist right now for pursuing this investigation.
Nina, your reaction to that? I mean, what we're talking about here, yes, the North trial is one thing, but the North trial is particularly interesting because of what it says about the activities of the last president and this president.
Well, the independent counsel or special prosecutor, my guess is not likely to look further into President Bush's activities because the special prosecutor's charter is really an investigation of the diversion and any lying that went on and stealing and cheating. And if President Bush was involved, as we now believe he was, it was in quid pro quo arrangements, which were, I hate to use the expression, but possibly, arguably, a simple violation of the Boland Amendment. And that really is more in the nature of Congress fighting out with the executive branch. Just how much it'll hurt the president, I don't know. I have the impression to some extent that this is a dead letter with much of the American public. It's certainly not going to help. It's not going to make him look like an American hero.
Is it a dead letter with the American Congress? I mean, you think once the North trial is over, they'll say, all right, enough already. We've finished with Iran-Contra once and for all?
Well, there are
Quickly, we've
already
only got 10 seconds left.
there are some indications that Congress is going to look into it, but how hard they'll look, I don't know.
All right, Nina Totenberg, Peter Kornbluh, thank you both very much. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been Nightline. If you wish a printed transcript of this or any Nightline broadcast, please send $3 to Nightline Transcripts, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007, or call area code 212-227-READ.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
This is ABC,